10 Things People Regret After Losing You. You think that title is for them, don't you? Like it's some little trophy you get to hold up in the mirror so you can admire the bruises you survived. So you can say, look, I was worth something after all. Look how they miss me now. Look how their hands shake when my name crawls into their throat. And I can see it, that tiny, almost embarrassing hope hiding behind your eyes. The one you pretend you don't have because you've been disappointed too many times to admit you still want to be chosen, still want to be seen, still want someone to stand up and say, I was wrong to treat you like a spare part in my life. You wear that hope like a bandage over a wound that never closes, and you call it dignity. You call it being over it. You call it moving on. But I know the truth. I know the little ritual you do when you're alone, replaying moments like they're security footage, slowing them down, zooming in on the exact second someone looked away when you needed them to look closer, pausing on the exact second your mouth opened and then closed again because you decided your pain was too inconvenient to share, too messy, too likely to get you laughed at or ignored. You learn to swallow words until they turned into stones, and you tell yourself it's strength, but it's really training, the kind that teaches you how to disappear while still standing in the room, smiling like everything is fine while you quietly negotiate with your own heart not to crack in public. And the funny part is, people loved you best when you were shrinking, didn't they? When you were easy, when you were useful, when you made your suffering small enough to fit in their schedule, when you apologized for needing anything at all, when you said, it's okay, even when it wasn't, especially when it wasn't. And then one day you stopped offering yourself like free water to people who never learned to say thank you, and suddenly they called you cold, suddenly they called you changed, suddenly they acted like you were the problem because you stopped bleeding where they could drink. That's where the regrets start. Not the dramatic kind they post about, not the fake poetry, not the big speeches people give to look deep, but the private regrets, the ones that pinch them at 2:17 in the morning when the room is too quiet and there's no audience to perform for. They regret underestimating how heavy your absence would feel, because they thought you were permanent, like a wall in a house they could lean on forever, without ever asking if your foundation was cracking. They regret the way they treated your kindness like a service they were entitled to, like you were built to absorb their moods, their stress, their boredom, their loneliness, like you were a soft place to land that never needed rest. They regret the jokes they made when you were already bruised, the little humiliations they hid inside just playing, because deep down they knew you laughed along to survive, not because it was funny. They regret the times you asked for something simple, time, honesty, effort, and they acted like you were asking for their lungs, like you were demanding too much, like your needs were a personal attack. They regret ignoring the warning signs, the quiet ones, the way your energy changed, the way your replies got shorter, the way your eyes stopped begging, because you finally accepted what they kept proving. They regret not defending you when other people turned you into a story, a rumor, a punchline, because staying silent was easier than standing with you, and they chose easy. They regret choosing pride over apology, because they thought you'd come back anyway. They thought your forgiveness was automatic, like a subscription they could cancel and restart whenever they felt like it. They regret the way they kept you as an option instead of a priority, how they fed you crumbs and watched you pretend it was a meal. They regret waiting too long to reach out, because they believed time would pause for them, because they thought you would stay in that same emotional position, frozen, available, loyal, bruised, but obedient. And they regret realizing the final truth too late, that the version of you they miss is the version they helped destroy, and the person you became after surviving them is not someone they can access with a casual, hey, and a smiling emoji. They regret losing you because they finally understand you were the rare kind of person who stayed even while you were hurting. And when you left, when you finally left, even if you stayed physically but left emotionally, it exposed how empty their world really was. And you sit there and act like you're above it, like you don't care, like you're just numb. But you still count those regrets like coins, don't you? Still wonder if any of them are real. Still wonder if any of them mean you mattered. Still wonder if the pain was at least useful as evidence that you were not invisible. And that's where I lean in and smile. Because your biggest weakness isn't that you loved too much. It's that you keep looking for proof you were lovable from people who benefited most when you doubted it. And you call that hope, faith in people? But it's really hunger. It's thirst. It's the kind of loneliness that makes you accept a glass of dirty water because you're scared there won't be anything else to drink. You want a psychological autopsy? Fine. Let's peel you open without making it pretty. You didn't just get hurt. You got trained. You got trained by small rejections that happen so often you stopped calling them rejections and started calling them normal. You got trained by being the one who reaches out first, the one who checks in, the one who smooths things over, the one who says, "It's fine, I understand," while your own chest is begging you not to understand anymore. You got trained by the way people's attention came with conditions, the way love felt like a performance review, the way affection showed up when you were entertaining, helpful, agreeable, and vanished when you were human. So you built a version of yourself that could survive that climate, a version that anticipates, that overthinks, that apologizes early, that offers extra, that tries to pay for love in advance, like a person slipping cash into a stranger's hand just to be allowed to sit near the warmth. And the cruelest part is you're smart enough to know what you're doing, but not disciplined enough to stop doing it when the hunger hits. You tell yourself you're patient. Really, you're afraid. You tell yourself you're understanding. Really, you're tolerating. You tell yourself you're loyal. Really, you're attached to the idea that if you just endure long enough, someone will finally notice the cost. You learned to make yourself smaller because you thought it would make you easier to keep. You learned to laugh at what hurt you because you thought it would make you safer. You learned to say, "No problem," with a smile because you thought it would make you lovable. And then you got angry at yourself for feeling empty, as if emptiness was a moral failure instead of the predictable result of pouring and pouring and pouring into hands that never learned how to hold. Listen to me closely, because this is where people like you get confused. You think the worst thing that happened to you was being abandoned or betrayed or ignored. That's painful, sure. But the worst thing that happened to you was the quiet deal you made with yourself afterward. The deal where you said, "I will not ask for what I need if it risks losing someone." The deal where you said, "I will accept half love if it keeps the room from going silent." The deal where you said, "I will become low maintenance so nobody has an excuse to leave." That deal is what killed your voice, and your voice is where your power lives. You've been living like a person who thinks love is scarce and must be earned through suffering. You've been living like your worth is a debate and other people get the final vote. And because you live like that, you keep ending up around people who love debates, people who like having the upper hand, people who enjoy the subtle control of watching you chase their approval. They don't always look evil. Sometimes they look charming. Sometimes they look wounded. Sometimes they look like they need you, and that's what hooks you. Because you confuse being needed with being valued. You confuse intensity with intimacy. You confuse attention with love. You confuse someone's crisis with your calling. And when you finally crack, when you finally show the parts of you that are tired, the parts that are angry, the parts that are done, they act shocked, like you betrayed the contract, like you were supposed to be the strong one forever, like you were supposed to be their shelter without ever needing shelter yourself. That's when they begin rewriting the story. That's when your kindness becomes manipulation in their mouths. Your boundaries become attitude. Your silence becomes punishment. Your pain becomes drama. And you, this is the part that makes me tilt my head and study you like a puzzle. Sometimes you believe them. You take their version of you and you wear it like a sentence. You stand in front of your own reflection and you cross-examine yourself. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe if I was better, they would have stayed. That's not humility. That's self-betrayal dressed up as accountability. Accountability is when you own your mistakes without turning yourself into a punching bag. Self-betrayal is when you punish yourself to spare other people the discomfort of being responsible. You've been doing that for a long time. It shows in the way you hesitate before you speak, like you're asking permission to exist. It shows in the way you try to predict moods, like you're walking through a house full of sleeping lions. It shows in the way you carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. Guilt from arguments you didn't start. Guilt from problems you didn't create. Guilt from other people's choices that you tried to prevent by sacrificing pieces of yourself. And still, you wonder why you feel hollow. Still, you wonder why you can't rest. Still, you wonder why compliments feel like lies. Still, you wonder why you're exhausted, even on days when nothing happens. Because your nervous system has been living in court for years, defending your right to be loved. And the judge is always someone else. That's what you need to grieve. Not just them, not just the relationship, not just the friendship, not just the respect you didn't get, but the years you spent negotiating for crumbs when you could have been building a table. And yeah, I said grieve, because grief is not only for death. Grief is for the version of you that kept hoping. Grief is for the time you gave away. Grief is for the apologies you offered for having a heartbeat. Grief is for the nights you lay there, phone glowing like a tiny moon, waiting for a message that would prove you mattered. And every minute that passed felt like a verdict. You remember those nights. Don't pretend you don't. You stared so hard at silence that silence started staring back, and you learned to translate it. If they cared, they would. If I mattered, they'd notice. If I was enough, they'd stay. Those translations carved grooves into you. And then, when someone finally did show up, when someone gave you a little warmth, you clung too quickly. Not because you were foolish, but because you were starving. Starving people don't ask if the meal is healthy. They just eat. That's not shameful. That's human. But you can't stay starving forever and call it love. I'm going to drag you through memory now, not to torture you, but to show you how your mind keeps lying to you in a friendly voice. You romanticize the beginning. You take the early sweetness, the early attention, the early promises, and you use them like a blanket over the later cold. You tell yourself, they weren't always like this, so maybe they can go back. You tell yourself, if I just say it the right way, if I just wait for the right time, if I just give them space, if I just prove I'm not a problem, they will remember who I am to them. No, they remember. They always remember. They just don't always care enough to act like it. And that's the part you avoid. Because it's cleaner to blame yourself than to accept that someone could see you clearly and still choose convenience over care. You'd rather believe you were unlovable than accept you were loved poorly. Because if you were loved poorly, then the world is unfair and you can't control it. If you were unlovable, then at least there's a project. Fix yourself, earn it, become better, become smaller, become easier, become perfect. Perfection is your little fantasy of safety. You think if you become flawless, nobody can hurt you. But flawless people are easy to use because they're desperate to stay flawless, desperate to avoid conflict, desperate to keep the peace. So they swallow disrespect and call it maturity. They accept neglect and call it independence. They endure betrayal and call it forgiveness. Forgiveness is not pretending the knife didn't cut. Forgiveness is acknowledging the wound without handing the blade back to the same hand. And here's another lie you tell yourself. You think